You were talking about the meeting that you had at the Gupta compound, and that
I'm sorry, Miss September. I'll have a less echo. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And then you spoke about that on the 13th of June 2017, you had handed an affidavit to Major General Matakata, and that is at paragraph 166 of your affidavit. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chair.
Is there anything that you would like to add
Chair,
in relation to that?
just on that point, I'm not casting any aspersions on General Matakata. I merely handed her the document. I'm not aware what transpired afterwards. She may or may have not, so I don't want it to be read that I'm casting aspersions on her, because she's an ex-colleague of mine with whom I had a healthy relationship, and I still have a healthy relationship with her. So for purposes of my evidence, I just want to clear that up.
But would she have been the one who would act on your complaint? As I understand it, your affidavit was a complaint against General Clemeza, is that right, or not really?
No, not really, Chair. It was more I wanted to bring it to, because at that juncture there were these allegations about the Guptas and state capture. So yes. I just thought it would be prudent for me to bring that to her attention, that I'd met with the Guptas myself.
So the affidavit that you handed to Major General Matakata was to bring to her attention, as the acting head of the Hawks, that you had met with the Guptas.
That's correct, Chair.
And nothing else, really? And
nothing else, Chair.
Okay, no, thank you.
Johan Booysen, are you aware as to whether or not anything happened after handing in the affidavit?
I'm not aware of anything pursuant to my affidavit, Chair, but there may or may not have been steps taken. I'm not privy to that.
But of course, if they didn't think there was anything wrong with you having met with the Guptas, they wouldn't have to do anything about it. Is that right?
I agree, Chair.
If you could then go back to Major General Clemeza. It is on page 53 of your affidavit and paragraph 177 that you make the following statement, and that is that he was undoubtedly handpicked for the position.
Which paragraph is that?
Sorry, it's paragraph 177.
Yes, Chair.
Can you please explain that? Apologies, Chair. It's page 53, paragraph 177.
Chair, I'll substantiate my assertion there. In the period that I worked with General Clemeza, he did not demonstrate to me that he had remotely the ability to lead an important institution like the Hawks. Secondly, the mere fact that a judge in the High Court had found him to be dishonest, lacking integrity, and in spite of that, Minister Nhleko still appoints him. I think the rest of what emerged after his appointment, his interference in a number of investigations, clearly indicates to me he was appointed for a specific reason. That's the only unescapable conclusion that I can come to.
And what reason was that? You say that he was appointed to that position for a very, very particular reason. What reason are you alluding to?
To interfere with investigations, such as the meeting with General Nkubeni, such as interfering with Colonel Roelofse in that investigation. The fact that I personally reported corruption to him, he did absolutely nothing about it. To me, it's abundantly clear that there were certain matters that he had to deal with.
Was he involved in the Pandey case at all?
Indirectly, Chair, because General Nkobeni was part of the Pandey investigation. So in meeting her, I would suggest that in a way, indirectly, he interfered with that investigation.
Are you then suggesting, and please correct me if I'm wrong, are you suggesting that he protected any particular interests?
Yes, I do, Chair.
And whose interests might that have been?
Chair, if one goes back into the history when General Dramat was the head of the Hawks, he actively pursued the investigations against Richard Ndluli. He backed me in my investigations. After he left the service, there were rumors in the media that he had approached General Munu for the Nkandla docket. A while later, while I was in Cape Town, when I launched my book, he actually came to the launch. And the day after, we had coffee, and I thought I want to verify that with him personally. And I asked him, did you ask for the Nkandla docket? And he said to me, yes, he did. So my conclusion is that they had to get rid of Dramat because he was looking at the Mdlulis of the day. He was backing Booysen in the Pandey investigation and various other investigations. Replaced him with someone pliable like Ntlametsa, and all of a sudden, all those investigations basically became dormant again.
If we can then move on to the next individual that you mentioned.
Well, Ms. Septon, before you move on, I see that at page 51, there is mention of Zikali, and I wonder whether that's the person that may have been appointed to a position. Can you cover that? And I see there is a reference to Lieutenant Colonel Sonekas, Adele Sonekas, and maybe that's the lady that was transferred, suspended.
That's correct, Chair.
So let's cover that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I may have been mistaken. I thought that the evidence in relation to Sonekas was already covered, but I'm happy to do so again.
Well, we didn't have the name, if I recall correctly, or did I misunderstand?
No, Chair, we had a name. I think the name I'd forgotten was the person that introduced me to Duduzane.
Oh, okay.
And as we adjourned, as I got up, I realized the name. It is Winston Innes.
Oh, okay. So that's the name that we didn't have.
That's correct, Chair.
Oh, okay. No, then I must have. But Zikali?
Chair, that's the person that Ndlametsa appointed to take over from me.
Yeah, that's important to
Yes, Chair.
I didn't hear that part.
So,
Yes.
Chair, when he appointed Zikali while I was actually still in the post,
Yeah.
it became evident to me from reports from KwaZulu-Natal, because I still communicate with the Hawks frequently,
Yes.
that things that Ntlametsa placed in motion, he continued with that. For instance, the removal of Colonel Sonekas from a post. In spite of the fact that they knew that it was unlawful, they were steadfast and resolute in not, and he was the leader, he was driving the bus at the time, and not allowing it to go back to a post.
That is now Zikali. He was leading the attempts to remove Sonekas.
By then, when he was appointed chair, she had already been removed. But when she came back,
Yeah.
She was transferred. And he's the one who told her that she's been transferred. So it's clear to me he was still doing the bidding of what Ntlametsa had set in motion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Much of the other evidence has already been covered.
Okay. I'll let you know if I pick up something that I don't remember. See.
I welcome your direction, Chair. The next individual is reflected on page 55 of your affidavit, and that's paragraph 184. The person marked is Ria Piecha.
I'm sorry. I think he must deal with paragraph 171. I know he has dealt with it in a certain way, but I think it's quite an important thing. And I think some of those that come there, I think in that paragraph and the subsequent and some of the paragraphs that come after that, he seems to indicate specific appointments, and there seems to be significance that he attaches to those appointments, and I think it's important that we hear what he has, the evidence there.
No problem. If I could then take you to paragraph 171 on page 52. And ask you to please explain that to the Chair.
Chair, there was the Hawks. When we inherited the Scorpions, we also inherited the chartered accountants working with them. So in KZN, we had a Brigadier Fleck, who was the chartered accountant, which is very necessary in investigating these complicated financial matters. Tlemeza made Fleck's life a living hell. He basically forced him out. He eventually resigned. So as we speak, there's no chartered accountant working with the Hawks in KZN, as far as I'm aware. He had appointed people at provincial level, and if you look at the appointments of people that I would regard as incompetent, Chair, and I deal with them, and I know some of them, or incompetent in that particular field. They might be competent in the uniform branch. Some of the senior people that he appointed comes from the uniform branch. They don't have any investigative experience. So it cascaded down to all the levels. So from provincial level to provincial commander level, they would then start, as posts became available to, and while I was still there was actually a standing joke amongst the provincial heads. The majority of the people that he appointed either came from the Eastern Cape, where he comes from originally, or from Limpopo, where he had been for the latter part of his career.
Yes.
And there was once a technical section there which was basically closed down that dealt with the downloading of cell phones and analysis of cell phones. So in general, Chair, I can say that a number, if not the vast majority of highly skilled detectives are either now back in SABC with the general detectives, some resigned, and some left through natural attrition.
Is it also correct that Major General Tlemeza replaced Major General Mosipi as the National Head of Commercial Crime with Major General Alfred Kana?
Chair, what happened there is when...
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Chair, what happened there is when the previous National Head of Commercial Crime, General Hans Meyering, went on retirement, General Dramat appointed General Mosipi into the position as head of commercial crime. And I know General Mosipi is a very capable, competent person who can handle that post. But when Tlemeza assumed office, he transferred Mosipi and created a vacancy, and the post was advertised, and the person that he then appointed in that post is a person by the name of General Alfred Kana. Now, Kana's history, Chair, he was the provincial commander from commercial crime in a couple of years previously. And according to General Hans Meyering, he had been busy with an investigation against General Kana relating to counterfeit goods. And it appears that Kana realized the writing was on the wall, and he resigned. He then went to another government department. I cannot recall which one it was, but nevertheless he landed back with the Hawks, being the head of commercial crime. And while I'm there, Chair, a couple of months ago, I received a call from a captain in East London. I do not know him at all. It's a black gentleman. He met me here on next to the road, and he handed me a pile of documents. And he complained to me that General Kana was interfering with an investigation into multi-million rand corruption which involves the Minister Dlamini. I took possession of those documents. I phoned Brigadier Basi from the Hawks' head office. I met him the following day at the Wimpy in Atterbury, where I explained to him what had occurred, and I handed him those documents. There are also other indications, Chair. I've been phoned by, and I would not like to mention this person because they might ostracize him. It's a very experienced investigating officer in KwaZulu-Natal. He was dealing with an investigation of appointments or applications for medical school in KwaZulu-Natal University, which also related to certain corrupt activities. And he also complained to me that General Kana had been interfering into that investigation.
Yes.
Unless there's anything else in relation to this.
No, you can continue.
Thank you, Chair. So the next individual is Ria Piega. Much detail is contained in your affidavit in relation to it, but I ask you, excuse me. General Booysen, to the extent that we haven't dealt with any particular paragraph under Major General Ntlemeza, do you confirm it to be correct?
I do, Chair.
I thought at the beginning he confirmed everything in his affidavit to be correct, but we've got to cover important things because evidence relating to law enforcement agencies is very important, and if the evidence that Major General Booysen is giving is true, and there are really very serious things that have been happening that shouldn't have happened. It's very important that we deal with these issues properly.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay. We don't have to deal with every detail, but we must cover important things.
Thank you, Chair. General Booysen, what was the difference in approach, or rather, let me ask you differently. Was Ria Piega involved in both the Cato Manor matter and the Mdluli matter?
I wouldn't say the Cato Manor matter, but definitely the Booysen matter and the Mdluli matter.
And when you mean Booysen matter, can you just clarify that, please?
It's his matter.
Okay. Then
you want to find out what role she played.
In fact,
is that what you want?
My question is slightly different, and that is, can you please explain what is the difference in approach that Ria Piega adopted to your matter as compared to the Mdluli matter?
Chair, the point I want to make here is if you juxtapose her approach, Re Mdluli and Re Booysen, they were vastly different. In the Mdluli matter, you have a High Court judge, Judge Murphy, who criticized General Piega for almost wanting Mdluli to come back to work in spite of very serious allegations hanging over his head. Excuse me, Chair. In my matter, in spite of the court having ruled that there's no case against me in a review application, in spite of a person that she had appointed, Advocate Nasir Kasim, to do a hearing on me, who exonerated me, she was bent. She was hell-bent on getting rid of me. She offered me those 3 options, which I testified about later. Chair, what I've forgotten to mention is, and when I went back to work, I went back in September, and that December I received a notice from her that I should indicate to her why I should not be dismissed from the police. It didn't make sense to me.
Out of the blue,
Out of the blue, Chair.
you had been to court, you had been vindicated, then you were told about 3 options, but subsequently you got correspondence saying you must say why you should not be dismissed.
That's true, Chair.
And what reason was offered as to why your dismissal was being contemplated?
Chair, she quoted a section in the police regulations which basically were designed if posts became, looking for the correct word now.
Redundant.
Redundant, that's right, thank you, Chair. If a post become redundant, then you can be relieved of your duties, and they will then pay you out for the remainder of your contract.
But that would be if nobody is going to continue to do the job that you were doing, I would assume.
Yes, Chair.
But,
I think
your position was not redundant, was it?
No, it wasn't, Chair.
So the letter you received from her was along those lines?
Along those lines, Chair.
So it was saying your post has become redundant and you must say why you should not be discharged or dismissed, blah, blah, blah.
She didn't go into those details. She just mentioned the regulations, Chair.
Yes, okay. But the gist of the letter was that it was asking for your representations as to why
I should not be dismissed.
you should not be dismissed.
Now, Chair, that to me didn't make sense at all. On the one hand, you have someone like Richard Mdluli, who has serious charges of fraud, corruption, murder, kidnapping, hanging over his head. The courts have pronounced on that. And she still actively attempts to get him back to the office by making or deposing the affidavit in the Mdluli matter in the High Court, and the judge actually criticized her for that. And in my matter, in spite of being the courts having found in my favor and the disciplinary officer, I refused to take any of the 3 options. I go back to work, and in that December, I think she gave me 2 weeks to say why I should not be dismissed from the police. And the 2 weeks expired, I think, on the 23rd of December. And I know how they operate. I knew what was going to happen. No matter what I say, on the 23rd, when the time expires, I would have gotten a letter like General Abia had gotten, that I'm dismissed. And the same thing happened to Shadrach Sabia. And it takes you forever and a day. By the time I would have won my cases to get back to office, I would have retired in any event. So I wrote a letter back to her. I gave her 2 days to withdraw that letter, or else I'll seek relief from the court. And then I think it was around about the 20th, a day or 2 before the date expired, I received a letter from her office, not signed by her, stating from one of her officers that the general or the commissioner is not available to articulate a response. And then I realized they were leading me into a trap, because I knew what was going to happen on the 23rd or 24th. Because by then it's Christmas Eve, there's no courts to approach. So I immediately set off and went to the High Court. I can't remember if it was the High Court or the Labour Court, and obtained the interdict against her, and that's where the matter ended.
Did you ever hear what the factual basis was for her to regard your position as redundant?
Chair, there was no basis.
And she didn't advance any?
There was absolutely no valid reason or lawful reason that she could have dismissed me from my post.
Because there was always going to be a need for the head of Hawks in the province.
That's correct, Chair.
Nobody had ever suggested that the hawks in the province could be without a head.
That's correct, Chair. I think one other thing she also mentioned, if my memory serves me correctly, is that the trust relationship between myself and the provincial commissioner had broken down.
That was in her letter.
That was part of that letter.
That was part of the letter.
That's correct, Chair.
And did she ever file any affidavit in response to your urgent application, either before the interdict was granted or later? I assume it was a temporary interdict you got.
Chair, the problem that she had is she had no locus standi because of the Glenister judgment.
Yes.
And it's on that basis that I managed to get the interdict, that she had no authority over me, General Dramat had. And I think she realized that when she saw my papers.
Yes.
And that they never opposed it.
General Booysen, please explain, much mention is made of the ground coverage document which surfaced from crime intelligence. Please explain the purpose of that document in context of the evidence you present today.
Chair, the ground coverage document is a document that emanated from crime intelligence in KwaZulu-Natal. When the Cato Manor investigation started, and we had this focus on Cato Manor, I one day went to Mr. Bheki clearly because I couldn't understand what was going on, and I said to him, can he perhaps explain to me why is there this urgency to get rid of us? He then explained to me that two things. One is, when it came to my appointment, he had a...
I'm sorry, who were you asking now?
Mr. Bheki Cele, the current Minister of Police.
Yes, at that time, what position was he holding?
Just, I can't recall whether he had...
by then Commissioner?
No, I think by then he was also himself suspended and had left. But I cannot recall exactly when that was.
Oh, okay. So you say you asked him why some of you were being pushed out.
And that's correct, Chair. And he mentioned two things to me. He said, my appointment, the then Minister of Police wasn't happy with it, Natim Tetwa. I don't know why. He preferred someone else from the Eastern Cape. But in the end, Mr. Cele was a National Commissioner at the time. It appears that he managed to convince the minister that I should be appointed. The second thing is he said that he had a visit from, while he was the National Commissioner, a visit from Richard Mdluli, who requested him to stop the investigation against Mdluli. And he refused. The next thing, a document comes from crime intelligence in KwaZulu-Natal. It's commonly known as the ground coverage document. This document, Chair, it's a very convoluted assembly of information and disinformation and conjecture mixed with facts. But some of the important allegations in this document states that Mr. Bheki Cele and a number of senior politicians had met, I think it was in Greytown, where they discussed how they were going to unseat the then President, Mr. Jacob Zuma. A lot of the issues, my name is also in that report, in that Mr. Bheki Cele owns taxis in the Stanger area, and that he gets Booysen, who then gets the Cato Manor people to take out his opponents, and that's why I became a general. That story eventually also appeared in the Sunday Times. I think it was the SABC disavowed any information pertaining to SABC in that docket. Senior politicians, I stand to be corrected, I think it was Mr. Toki Segwale at the time, made comments about the document, and he actually said that the elephant in the room was Mdluli. This document, and why I know it comes from a specific individual, Chair, I can explain later if it's necessary, but it definitely came from KwaZulu-Natal. It was then given to Richard Mdluli, and he was still at office because he declassified it. He then took that document and sent it to the then President, Mr. Jacob Zuma, basically showing him what these people are busy with. And I think it's round about just after that where he also wrote a letter to the President where he said that should he return to work, that he would assist the President.
So this would, I remember that you said that that letter would have happened in 2011 or thereabouts, the letter.
That's correct, Chair.
This document that you have just spoken about, when did it circulate or when did it emerge? Was it around about the same time?
Chair, I think it was around about 2010, round about there.
Okay, so it was before the letter.
It was before the letter,
Before
Chair.
the letter, yes. Okay, all right, thank you.
There are certain observations that you have made in relation to sequence of events, which takes cognizance of this particular report. And you do so at paragraph 191, page 56 of your affidavit. Can I ask you to read these observations into the record, please?
Thank you, Chair. Paragraph 191 of my statement. I say my observations of the sequence of events depicted below are conspicuous. Then, number one, Mthethwa irregularly appoints Mdluli as CI head. And the reason why I say that, Chair, the then Minister of Police appointed Mdluli as a CI head, and at the time, the National Commission at the time, Tim Williams, regarded his appointment as irregular. They didn't follow procedure. And also Dr. Johan Booysen from the Institute for Security Studies also commented at the time the appointment appears to be a political appointment. After his appointment, Mdluli starts to allegedly loot the Secret Service's account. One of the benefactors of the looting of the Secret Service's account is Mr. Mthethwa himself, and I've testified about the building of the fence around his premises, Chair. Subsequently, Major General Mark Hankel blows the whistle on the looting of this fund. Then an investigation into the looting of the Secret Service's account commences. Then there's a KZN leg of the investigation, which is conducted by Brigadier Simon Maronsela. Maronsela elicits my assistance in the investigation after crime intelligence refused to release documents required to finalize the investigation. Mdluli earlier requested Cele, that's now Minister Bheki Cele, to stop the investigation initiated by Dramat and Sabia. Mr. Cele refuses. Then the ground coverage document surfaces. Mr. Cele is then suspended as the National Commissioner for an unrelated matter. That was the Rusha Bongo matter, Chair, which you would recall. And then the Sunday Times article pertaining to the Cato Manor issue, which contains the same allegations which are in the ground coverage document is established. Chair, if I could perhaps just stop there quickly.
Did you mean to say published?
Yes. So what I would just like to say there, Chair, this ground coverage document, I know it comes from a certain individual within crime intelligence, a person by the name of Colonel N.H. Singh. The reason why I know that is when I took the Sunday Times to the press ombudsman, we communicated to and fro about my complaints and they would respond. And in one of their letters to the press ombudsman at the time, they mentioned that one of their sources was Colonel N.H. Singh, who had given them the information. But more importantly, General Dina Moodley, who was the head of crime intelligence in KwaZulu-Natal, told me personally that N.H. Singh was responsible for the compilation of that document while he was seconded on duty to work with Richard Mdluli in Gauteng for a period of time. I think it was 18 months. And then after the Sunday Times article attempts to suspend me are made, I obtained the interdict, and then what happened afterwards, I had it reversed. Then the meeting which I testified about yesterday, Chair, where Mr. Mtetwa meet the prosecutors essentially demanding our arrest. That's according to the handwritten minutes of a meeting which Anthony Mosing detailed on the 8th of March 2012. And then flowing from that is the interview Karima Brown had with the minister, in which he admitted that he had a meeting with prosecutors, although he tried to justify the meeting. And then Cato Manor detectives are arrested for racketeering. 2 months later, I was arrested for managing a so-called criminal enterprise. And then Mdluli was ultimately suspended pending the corruption and murder investigations. When he attempts to return to office, Freedom Under the Law filed an application to High Court. Freedom Under the Law files an application to High Court to prevent him from doing so. And then, what I say, in an extraordinary development, the National Commissioner, Ria Piega, then files an affidavit assisting him to go back to the office.
Chair, a copy of that judgment is found in Annex to JB, sorry,
Yes.
Annex to ZB, from pages 354 to 441.
Yeah, thank you.
If I can now ask you to turn to page 60, please. Can you please, you make certain statements in relation to Ria Piega and Richard Mdluli. Can you please clarify the relationship as you understood it to be, or understand it to be, between those two individuals?
Other than my observations that she was hell-bent on getting rid of me, in spite of me being exonerated on more than one occasion, yet on the other hand, someone that faces serious charges, she tries to, well, not try to get him back to it, but she, like Judge Murphy said, she didn't want to stand in his way to come back to work. That to me just didn't make sense.
If one were to look at paragraph 201, you talk specifically to Ria Piega's relationship with Advocate Nomgcobo Jiba. Is there any additional comments that you wish to make to that?
Chair, what happened there is, subsequent to myself having laid a complaint against Advocate Jiba, and the matter was being investigated by a Lieutenant Colonel Bouts Botha. He had investigated the matter and obtained all the necessary statements, I assume. And then the next thing I heard on the news that they wanted to serve a subpoena or a summons on Advocate Jiba to appear in court on charges, and that she was not available at the office. It was in the media at the time. And then eventually the media reported that they'd served the summons on Mr. Nkasana to give to her because she reported to him. And then that same evening, I heard a radio statement of Mr. Nkasana, who took issue with General Piega for the role she played, because there appears to have been a spat between Piega and Nkasana. And it was evident from the news reports and from the radio interviews that there was conflict between the NDPP and the National Commission of the Police. In my view, the National Commission of the Police should not have involved her with decisions taken by the NDPP's office, which she clearly did. She was so incensed by the fact that Advocate Jiba eventually received a summons that she summarily terminated the services of Colonel Botha. Colonel Botha had been on an extended contract He was one of the investigating officers in the Oscar Pistorius matter. But she summarily terminated his contract, and then General Moon, who was then the divisional head of detectives, assigned that docket to, I think it was a Major General Taiwe.
I see that in paragraph 196 you say that it emerged in your disciplinary hearing that Mr. Mdluli had interfered with the Pandey investigation as well. And you refer to Major General Lazarus.
That's correct, Chair.
Yes.
Chair, when my disciplinary hearing was ongoing, when they closed the case against me, it was now my turn to give evidence. I'd approached a number of the investigators from the Hawks to come and give evidence on my behalf. And most of them undertook to do so, but every time I would phone them a day or two before the time they disappeared, I couldn't get hold of them. My attorney eventually managed to get hold of them, and they were given instruction. They said the instruction came from Piega that they cannot come and testify in my favor. At that time, Subramani, Chair would recall, who was one of the investigators in the beginning, whom I had to investigate.
On the Pandey matter.
That's correct,
Yes.
Chair. He had told me at the time that he had resigned, but I'd found out in the meantime that he had not resigned, that he was working at Crime Intelligence in Benoni. I then managed to trace him, and I asked him, Vasan, are you prepared to come and testify for me? And he said, yes, I will. I did not tell anyone that he was coming, and the hearing at that stage was in chambers here in Sandton. So I said to him, I'll pick him up at the Gautrain station, which I did the morning. I took him in. It was at that stage where they wanted General Nkubeni to come and testify. And I knew she wouldn't come. And then they said, no, they're going to adjourn her because she didn't arrive. I said, no, well, I do have a witness here. We can proceed with this witness. I was unaware of what he was going to testify about.
That is Nkubeni?
No, this was Vasan Subramani.
Oh.
Nkubeni never pitched.
Yes, okay.
I just wanted him to confirm the issues around the investigation. But while he was giving evidence, and that was the first time I heard about it, he said that in the initial stages of the investigation, he was approached by Richard Mdluli and Solly Lazarus, also a Major General from the Hawks, who has now been dismissed, I think also issues relating to the slush fund. They approached him in Belito, where they told him that they've got information that his life is under threat, and they proposed him it's better if he comes to Gauteng, and if he comes to Crime Intelligence.
That is Subramani.
Subramani, Chair.
Yes.
And they also indicated to him that there's a possibility that he might be promoted if he comes. This was not reported to me. That was now the first time I hear about this. He then said...
At the disciplinary hearing.
At the disciplinary hearing, Chair. He says, that's what Subramani told me. He then, because he feared for his life, because he's got a wife and a kid, I think, he decided to take up this position with Crime Intelligence and be known. And he said to me, he sat in the office doing nothing. He told them at the time that he needed to continue with the Pandey investigation. He said, but he was basically just left there in the office. To such an extent, he was getting so bored, he pleaded with him to give him something to do, even if it's some HR work. So the hand of Mdluli is clear into the interference of the investigation of Pandey.
So at the time that Subramani was, at the time that he moved from KZN to Benoni, was he still involved in the Pandey investigation?
Yes, Chair.
And he was supposed to be continuing with it?
Chair, he told me he's going to resign.
Yeah, he told you he had resigned.
Yeah.
So obviously, and you say, but he had not resigned. He had resigned from the Hawks, maybe?
No, Chair, but initially he told me he had resigned. But later on, obviously through your contacts in the police, I established that he was working at crime intelligence
In Benoni? Yes. Okay. So when he moved from KZN to Benoni, he was still involved in the Pandey investigation.
Up until the day he left, Chair.
And up until, yeah.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah.
Yes, Chair.
And then when he left, once he was in crime intelligence, then obviously he was going to be doing something else.
Yes, but then he did nothing, Chair.
Then he said he did nothing. And would there have been other people who would have continued with the Pandey investigation in his absence, do you know?
Well, Chair, there were a couple of investigators, Colonel Hans van Lochenburg.
Yes.
There was Colonel Herbst. Most of them were people from the ex-Scorpions DSO.
Yes.
Even Subramani was also from the ex-DSO.
At the time that Subramani gave evidence in your disciplinary hearing, how long had he been in Benoni? Do you have some idea? I'm just trying to understand to the extent that this may have disturbed the Pandey investigation. How long did it?
Chair, I would say probably like 2 years.
About 2 years. Did that coincide with the time when you were on suspension, or part of the time?
It coincided with the period of my suspension, Chair.
Yes. Okay. And did you get to know for how long he was sitting there doing nothing in Benoni, of the 2 years or so?
Well, Chair, he told me, Subramani himself told me after he'd given evidence, that he sat there doing nothing, and he actually pleaded with him to give him something to do. He was getting bored. He even said that he asked him, give me some HR work to do.
So was your understanding that he was talking about that entire period since he had left KZN, that he was sitting there doing nothing? So if that period was 2 years, that would have been 2 years of doing nothing.
That's exactly what he told me, Chair.
Yes. Thank you.
General Booysen, do you confirm that there are in fact 2 affidavits that have been attached to your affidavit from Colonel Brian Padayachi?
I do, Chair.
And do you also confirm that it was Colonel Brian Padayachi who managed the intelligence in relation to the Pandey investigation?
I confirm that, Chair.
Did Ria Piecha get involved in the upliftment of communication recordings at all?
She did, Chair. What happened is Padayachi, who was in charge of the monitoring of the Act 70 interceptions, at one stage also reported to Ria Piecha issues relating to the investigation. And I think that's perhaps something that he can talk about, but for his effort, he also got suspended. And then a while later, he informed me that, Chair, how it works is the interceptions are done at a specific place in Pretoria. The investigators would sit in the respective provinces. It's not live listening, so they record and then they'll send it to the investigators. But the originals are kept in Pretoria. And then at one stage, Padayachi informed me that General Piecha had sent a brigadier, I cannot recall the name, I think it was a white lady, I stand to be corrected, to uplift the intercepted calls, the actual discs. Now, Chair, if it's indeed true, and she did not follow due process, in my view, that's she committed a criminal offence. She might have followed due process, but I'm not aware that she had followed a proper protocol and process.
Chair, for the record, I failed to mention that the affidavits of Colonel Padayachi is reflected at Exhibit ZB, which is JB 26, page 472 until 498. At paragraph 207 of your affidavit, do you confirm that Ria Piecha was also the subject of a criminal investigation when she alerted Lieutenant General Arno Lamour.
I confirm that, Chair.
And that was an alert of a criminal investigation against him.
That's true, Chair.
But it did not result in any prosecution steps being taken.
No, Chair, it didn't.
And I may have missed this. Did you cover that issue about Major General Ntombela at 199 and Henkel?
Chair, with regards to General Ntombela,
Yes.
while they were having the disciplinary hearing against me, he phoned me and we met. And he told me that he was the first person that was given the task to investigate me.
And what was his position, Ntombela?
Chair, he was a provincial commissioner either in Limpopo or Mpumalanga. I cannot recall.
Okay.
I think it was Mpumalanga.
Yes, okay. So he phoned you and said what?
And so I meet him and he says to me, he just wants to tell me he was the first person that were allocated to the investigation against me, and that he didn't feel comfortable with it, and he did some investigations. I don't know what he did, but he reported back to, I think it was at the time General Piega, and she obviously weren't happy with that. But the other important thing is, Chair, and that's what he told me. Piega asked Ntombela to investigate the conduct of General Mark Henkel, the whistleblower. So he did a complete investigation. When he finalized his investigation, his conclusions were that Mark Henkel had done nothing wrong. He'd done the right thing. And he said to me, Piega was furious with him. She then allocated the investigation to someone else. But the important thing here, Chair, at that point, the contracts of both General Ntombela and General Nkobeni had come to end. He had a clear record, absolute clear record, he had no complaints.
That is Ntombela.
Ntombela.
Yes.
His contract was not renewed, whereas General Nkobeni, having all these investigations hanging over her, General Piega renewed her contract.
And which year are we talking about at that time, more or less? If you are able to
I'd say
remember.
2013, 2014, Chair.
Certainly that was a time when the investigation against the provincial commissioner in KZN, Ngobeni, had started.
It
It had
wasn't.
started a year or two before.
Chair, it was an advanced stage. I think it coincides with a letter that Advocate Norco alluded to that yesterday, and I actually mentioned that in my response to Norco's memorandum, that I found it no coincidence that that report was released at the time that General Nkobeni's contract had expired. I think it was somewhere in 2014, Chair.
So you say there was a provincial commissioner, Mpumalanga, or whatever the province Ntombela was in, who, as far as you know, had clean record, had no complaints against him, and he had been asked to investigate you, and he found nothing, and reported accordingly to General Piega. His contract was not renewed. And then the contract of the provincial commissioner in KZN, Major General Ngobeni, there was an investigation pending against her, but hers was renewed. That's what you say.
And over and above that, the issue that he was instructed to investigate Mark Henkel,
Yes.
the whistleblower,
Yes.
which Piega was also, well, the result of which he was not happy
Yes.
with either.
Ntombela conducted that investigation as well.
He did, Chair. He
Yeah,
told
and-
me
and found nothing wrong.
nothing against Mark
Yes.
Henkel.
And then General Piega was very angry about
He
that.
said she was very angry.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If we can now turn to page 62 of your report, the next individual that you refer to is Major General Johan Booysen. Your concerns in relation to this particular individual is mentioned in the context of 3 investigations. The first is one which relates to the former Police Commissioner Jackie Salebi. The other is a several multi-million rand investigation of exhibit money which was recovered after a heist at ORT International Airport, which was stolen from the Benoni police station. And the last is in relation to the investigation of the Cato Manor Death Squad. It's in that context that you place evidence before this commission.
It's in that context, Chair.
Can you please give detail to your evidence relating to Mabula in the context of those investigations?
Chair, Major General Jan, I think it's Tebo Mabula, but we know him as Jan Mabula, was my counterpart in the Northwest Province. When the Cato matter started, General Ramat told me that he's appointing Mabula, General Ntsika, and General Badi to investigate the allegations in the Sunday Tribune. Ntsika never arrived, and Badi never arrived. Mabula arrived with a team from the Northwest. One of them, I recall, was Colonel Manu, also a very controversial officer who subsequently passed away. It didn't strike me at the time, but later on I put 2 and 2 together. General Mabula, was in cahoots with Advocate Jiba at the time of the arrest of Advocate Gerry Nel. What transpired, Chair, after my arrest, I received a phone call from a senior police officer who wanted me to meet someone. So I happened to be in Pretoria, and we met at Centurion at the McDonald's. And this person related the following story to me, Chair. He said to me, what Mabula is doing to you is wrong, because he's guilty of something like that himself. And he related the following story to me. There was a huge heist at the OR Tambo airport. I think over 100 million rand was stolen. Whether it was dollars or rand, I cannot recall, Chair. People were arrested for that, and the monies were recovered and kept in a safe at, I think, Benoni Organised Crime. Someone broke into the offices, and I think 12 million rand was stolen. Mabula at the time was a colonel, and he was tasked to lead the investigation into the theft of the money. Chair, then I started to do some research myself afterwards, but let me continue with the story. He says one of the people that they arrested is a guy by the name of, I think, Soli Ngwenya, a suspect in the matter. He was taken to the Macau police station. And at the Macau police station, they were busy interrogating him. Jan Mabula was in an adjacent office. He wasn't present. He was in the office next door. And he was there with, I think she was a Captain Mokoena. He says, and they were busy interrogating this suspect, Soli Ngwenya, but they were torturing him. He was part of it, he told me. And he says, he described to me, they would take the tube and then pull it over his head until the person suffocated. A long story short, this person collapsed and they couldn't revive him. Then they realized this person had died. He says then he went next door, or they went next door. I can't recall whether it was him or, but he also...
That's Mabula telling you the story?
No,
Who was telling you the story?
It's a gentleman. I would not mention his name now.
Oh, you don't want to mention his name.
But
yeah.
if the chair would want me to, I can.
Yeah.
But I think for his own safety,
No, that's
because
fine.
what happened afterwards, Chair, people were being killed left, right, and centre.
Yes.
They then went next door to tell Mabula, hey, we've got a problem now. This man, Shonile Manje, he doesn't want to wake up. Then Mabula was sitting on the chair. He fell down. He passed out himself. And then one of the captains there, was a Captain Dube, female captain, took a coat and waved him to wake up. So when he woke up, they realized they had a problem. So they decided they're going to take the body to, I think he said the Baragwanath Hospital. And then they took him to the hospital to say, no, this man had a heart attack. When they arrived at the hospital, the doctor said, no, this man has been dead for about 2 hours now. He didn't have a heart attack. They went back and reported this to Mabula. Mabula then had some arrangement, and he didn't give me those details, with a doctor who eventually certified this person dead. The family at the time and the media, obviously later on started reading about it, was very unhappy that their family member died in police custody. Then the people that were present when this person died, when Solly died, Mabula met them at a lake, country, I think it was Germiston Lake, where he told them how to formulate their statements. They had a follow-up meeting in which, and he described to me, the one guy said, no, they're having nightmares. I said to him, what do you mean nightmares? He says, no, they were saying that one of the people that were present when Solly died was that they were having nightmares at night. This man was spooking by them. And then Mabula would say to him, no, don't worry, we'll sort it out. And he told them exactly how to make the statements. Chair, at that point, I listened to what he said, but I was in the middle of the fight of my life with Jiba and all and sundry. I didn't do anything about it at the time. 6 months later, I get a call from General Shadrack Sibia. I might mention, Chair, the person who introduced me to this other person was General Shadrack Sibia. He then said to me, hey, Johan, did you report this thing to ICD? I said to him, Shadrack, I'm too busy fighting my own battles, so I haven't got time for that. He says, no. The person who related the story to me and another person who was off sick, they were the only two people that never made statements at the time that Solly Ngwenya died. And now all of a sudden, ICD is approaching them for statements. I said to him, Shadrack, I can give you an undertaking. I did not contact ICD. I'm too busy. He said to me, can these guys come and see you? I said, by all means. Actually, that was about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. 7 o'clock the following morning, I received a call there in Durban. So it must have been of some concern to them because they'd driven through the night. I then asked, I think it was Captain Pelzer from my office, if he's got a recording device for me. I took a recording device with me, and I met them on the beachfront. And I had arranged with a person that I know at the Suncoast Casino that we can go and sit in one of the restaurants and talk. So they inquired from me. They said to me, it's just strange that they were the only two that never made statements in that matter in which Ngwenya died, but now the ICD wants to see them. And I told them there's no way that it was me who told the ICD. And then I tried to figure out who it could have been, and we had some discussions. And Chair, then...
Is the ICD the predecessor to the IPEP?
Yes, Chair.
Okay.
Yes, Chair. So, Chair, then I said to him, but let's just recoup what happened when Solly died. And then they told me the whole story from the beginning to the end. Exactly that, like he told me the previous time. And I then said to them, look, the only suggestion that I can make to you guys, go to a lawyer, make an affidavit, go to the prosecuting authority and lay your cards on the table, because there's a whole group of you people. It's the first one who decides to become a 204 witness. And I said to him, look, what I'll do for you is I'll take you to my lawyer. I made an arrangement for my lawyer to meet them. He met with them. They related the story to, and he gave them the lawyer gave them the same advice. They said they would think about it, but it was clear that they were extremely scared. They then left, and they said that they would let us know. They never went to a lawyer and deposed an affidavit. I subsequently took the recording and I gave it to Mr. McBride. Mr. McBride initiated an investigation, and not long after that he was suspended himself. When he returned to office, he phoned me and he said to me, the recording had gone missing. Do I have another copy? I said, no, I have another copy. So I favored him with another copy. Subsequent to that, Mr. McBride told me that they had managed to obtain corroborating evidence, and the matter had gone to the DPP, and those were one of the cases that Mr. McBride expressed his frustrations about, that they were not getting any positive feedback from the National Prosecuting Authority. I don't know where that docket is right now, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Chair, I might just add, if I managed to obtain a copy of the post-mortem report of Solly Ngwenya, and the post-mortem report says he died from asphyxiation. From asphyxiation.
Okay.
So he's in police custody. He dies from. Someone must be held accountable for his death. It's not net. If you die from asphyxiation, it's an unnatural death while you're in police custody, and no one is responsible for that.
Yes.
Chair, which takes us to his investigation in the Cato Manor matter. When he arrived there, I said to him, Jan, here's my office, here's my equipment, I made everything at his disposal. And I think I did testify about this earlier on, where people like Morstead would phone me and say to me, the investigators have traced the informers and they're putting pressure on the informers to change their versions. And that's when I also received a call from Lieutenant Zungu, who met me and told me that he'd been approached by detectives working with Mabula, and he told me that Mabula was present in the room at the Blue Waters Hotel, where they interrogated him about certain issues relating to the killing of Mkhize. Pardon me, Chair. And they wanted Zungu to change his statement to implicate me in the killing of Mkhize, and he refused.
To implicate you?
Yes, Chair. And he refused. Zungu refused. And
this was Mabula and who were?
The detectives that worked with Mabula.
Or Mabula wasn't there, but it was detectives.
Chair, he told me Mabula was there.
Yes.
And prior to me giving evidence, I just wanted to make sure. I phoned him again. I said to him, Zungu, I just want to confirm, you told me that Mabula was present then. He said, yes, he was present.
Okay.
Chair, on that point, a copy of Sibusiso William Zungu's statement is included in the bundle in Exhibit ZB, and it begins at page 500 with a typed version continuing to page 508. The next individual that you deal with is Colonel Rajan Iyer, and that's on page 64. You have already given much evidence in relation to Colonel Iyer, to the extent that, based on the evidence that you have given, there's nothing additional in the affidavit as such. Is there any additional remarks you may wish to make in relation to him?
Chair, I think I've testified extensively about Mr. Rajan Iyer. He is subsequently dismissed from the police for dishonesty. There's another case pending against him of intimidation. Sorry, Chair, he was dismissed for the case still under investigation, for intimidation and a few other charges. That matter, I understand, is with the DPP's office. In another matter in which he fabricated evidence against individuals in a robbery matter, the magistrate, Mr. Anand Maharaj ordered an inquiry into his evidence, where he lied under oath and fabricated evidence. He got his girlfriend to make statements which were untrue, to implicate people that weren't implicated in the commission of that offence at all. And that disciplinary hearing and the criminal trial is still in the process, but subsequent to that, he committed another offence which is still an investigation, but he was dismissed from the police for that. The point I'm making, Chair, is here you have a person with a very dubious character, which got an axe to grind with myself, whom I'd charged departmentally. He was found guilty and basically kicked out of the Hawks by General Dramat. And that's a type of person, and even if what he says is true in his statement, Judge Gorwin held that it relates to nothing other than office politics. But that's a type of witness, that's the key witness, Chair, that Advocate Jiba and Sean Abrams relies upon to convict me for racketeering.
If I could then take you to page 65, at which you deal with the next individual who's named Brigadier Nyameka Kaba. Do you confirm that this particular brigadier worked under your command?
I do, Chair.
And you also confirm that he was involved in the investigation relating to the complaint from Tom Moyane?
I do, Chair.
He was also involved in, or rather under, Brigadier Kaba's command.
Well, let him testify.
Okay,
Let him testify.
no problem, Chair. Do you have any comments in relation to his involvement on the matter concerning Mr. Flock Symington?
Yes. Now, put your questions more neutrally.
Chair.
Chair, Brigadier Kaba used to work with me in KwaZulu-Natal. He was a colonel then, and eventually was promoted to head office, where he is a brigadier. My understanding that he heads crimes against the state. And I refer to the PCLU at the National Prosecuting Authority yesterday, who are mandated to do serious crimes like human trafficking, Foreign Military Assistance Act. Crimes against the state, in my view, would relate to crimes such as treason, sedition, and crimes of that nature. So to start off with, I find it suspicious that a brigadier is in charge of crimes against the state and manages to get himself involved with an investigation relating to a complaint by Mr. Tom Moyane. I don't regard that complaint as being a crime against the state. During that investigation, there was an incident that was televised on television where Mr. Kaba and people with him, and that's my observations of watching what I saw on TV, kept him in a room against his will. They also took or attempted to take documents from him by force, which in my view could amount to at least common assault. My understanding that a case was open, but under the stewardship of the NPA at the time, Mr. Sean Abrams, unsurprisingly, that matter was also declined to prosecute. I was also told by Mr. McBride that Kaba had involved him with the investigation against Mrs. Sissoko and Mr. Innocent Kua. But Chair, the point I'm making is a brigadier heading crimes against the state, getting involved with these type of matters. What I also found very strange was when in one of the affidavits that Advocate Jiba deposed to in the civil litigation that we were involved in, he happens to be the person that commissions a statement. One could read anything and like it, but I just find it a bit suspicious. Mr. Kaba might argue that the investigation is lawful. The investigation might have been lawful, but I find it a bit conspicuous that he had involved himself in these type of investigations. And I just want to go back a bit further, Chair. Same prosecutors every time, same investigators every time. Brigadier Kaba, and I know him personally, he's got an LLB degree. He should know what's right and what is wrong when it comes to what to do and what not to do. He's not stupid. He should have told whoever told him to do what he was doing. He should have told him, I'm not going to involve myself with this, or at least the book of sick will do something. But he knew well that he was doing the bidding of someone else when he performed these actions.
And then the last individual that you deal with is on page 66, and that is Brigadier Prasa Ube. What are your comments in relation to this Brigadier?
Chair, I've already given evidence how he arrested me. He didn't even know what the founding affidavit was, but nevertheless, he was the henchman tasked to arrest me the first time I was arrested. And he was also the henchman tasked to arrest me the second time when Sean Abrams authorized my prosecution. And I recall when they took me to the cells the second time around at Durban Central Police Station, the moment the cell doors closed, he immediately made a call. And he said, General, he was arrested. Now, the only general that I can think of that he had phoned at the time, and I'm speculating, but it must have been General Ntlametsa. There was no reason, Chair, to once again chuck me in the cells, put me in the back of a police car, and then cart me to court, and then put me in the bottom of the grill and up the stairs like a common criminal. Chair, Mubi also got involved with.
So they put you at the back of a police van.
They wanted to, Chair, but then there was another officer. I cannot. I can. It was a Brigadier Pembe, I think it was. I'd done a course with him in Stellenbosch. He heard from his office that I'm in the cells at Durban Central, and they were going to put me in the back of the police van to take me to court. He then came down, and he said to them, there's no ways he's going to allow, because him and myself were like partners on this course in Stellenbosch. And he told them there's no ways he's going to let me drive in the back of a police van. He's going to take me in his police car. So I jumped in the car with him. He took me to court.
Thank you, Chair. In that instance, can I ask that we please turn to slide 6, which appears in bundle ZD, and that's the diagrams bundle. Okay. General Booysen, you will recall that at the beginning of your evidence, and I shall quote.
Chair, before can I just make a correction? It was
Yes.
General Mpete. I just remember now, the guy who said he's not going to allow them to put me in the police van. He's going to take me himself.
Oh, what's his name?
Mpete, I can't remember his first name, Chair.
What's the spelling? Or is it here?
No, it's not in my statement, Chair.
Oh, okay. Have you got the spelling?
Chair, I'll spell it M-P-E-T-H-E.
Okay. What was his position?
That time he was a brigadier, Chair.
Yes.
But I understand he's now a general.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, let's deal with slide 6. Do you confirm that this slide is essentially a consolidation of the two previous slides, the one which deals with individuals in the prosecution cluster, and the other being individuals within the law enforcement cluster?
I do, Chair.
Chair, the key on the top right-hand side informs that the law enforcement individuals are marked in a black background and the prosecution individuals are marked in a white background, which for some other reason does not appear on the slide.
Just repeat that.
It's the next slide.
Just repeat what you have just said.
Yes. Chair, the witness has confirmed that this is a combination of the two slides. On the top right-hand side is a little block which has a black backing, and that indicates the law enforcement individuals which populate the diagram. And
What page of this exhibit is that? I thought I've got it, but it looks like I haven't got it.
it's the last page, Chair, page 6.
Does this diagram not suffer from the challenges that I mentioned earlier in regard to the other one? Okay, all right, I am there.
This diagram, the witness has confirmed, is a combined diagram of the law enforcement diagram and the prosecution's diagram. And in particular, the individuals that this witness, Ms. General Booysen, has addressed in his evidence. General Booysen, if I could point you to the diagram as such.
You said something about those who are in black and those who are in white. The individuals whose names are written on white would be prosecutors or
Yes, Chair.
NPA personnel, prosecutors.
Yes, Chair.
And then you have got names that are on black. You say those are investigators.
That's individuals from the law enforcement team, be it the Hawks or the South African Police
From
Services.
SABC.
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, okay.
It's simply a combination of the two previous diagrams. Having said that, if I could take you to the diagram itself, there appears to be common role players, as you've already given evidence to. When I say common role players, I'm specifically talking about individuals who have been involved in more than one of the cases that you've given evidence to. Is that correct?
That's true, Chair.
If I could then take you down to the key on the bottom left-hand side, which then identifies the individuals who have been involved in more than one case, as you've given evidence to, being the Pandey investigation marked in blue, the Amigos case marked in red, the looting of the Secret Service account marked in yellow, and the Cato Manor investigation marked in green. Can I ask you to read into the record the individuals who appear common in more than one matter, as indicated in the key on the bottom left-hand side?
You refer to the cross-cutting persons.
Yes, please. Yes, General Booysen.
Chair, in the Cato Manor investigation, the Secret Services account investigation, the common denominator there from the advocates are Advocate Jiba and Tenjwa. With regard to the Secret Services account and the Pandey case, in Tlemetsa, the Pandey case and the Amigo case, Mgwebi, the Amigo case and the Cato Manor case, Mozine, the Pandey case and the Amigo case and the Cato Manor case, Noko, Cato Manor case, the Secret Service account case and the Pandey case, Mdluli and Piega.
Thank you. Is there any coincidence, based on your experience, to there being common individuals involved in these matters?
Chair, from time to time there will be coincidences where certain individuals will overlap with other individuals. But over a period of time, invariably the same names from the prosecuting authority, the same names from SABC, the same investigators from SABC. When these type of investigation, I refer specifically about the Cato Manor investigation, the Pandey investigation, the Amigos case investigation, the looting of the slashing fund investigation, the rendition investigation, and the SARS so-called road. Chair, I think I have a better chance of winning the lotto, but it's impossible that the same people somehow just figure to be the prosecutor or the investigator or the manager of these investigators in all those cases, Chair, over a period of time.
If I could then turn your direction to the blocks alongside the circles. So if we start with the red circle, which is the Amigos block, alongside it is marked a block, beneficiaries in the Amigos case. In your view, based on the evidence that you've given, who were the beneficiaries in the Amigos case?
In the Amigos case, the obvious beneficiaries are Peggy Ngoyeni and Mike Mabuyikulu.
And then in the Pandey investigation, which is the circle marked blue, there's another block.
There, the beneficiaries in the Pandey matter, Chair, would be Colonel Naveen Madhu, Captain Narain Prasad, Lieutenant General Nkobeni, she's now resigned from the police, Toshan Pandey, Debo Mzobe, and Edward Zuma.
And if one were to do the same to the block alongside the yellow circle, which deals with the looting of the Secret Service account, who were the beneficiaries?
Chair, although in my view there were a number of beneficiaries, but the ones that I directly dealt with and know about is Richard Ndluli and Minister Natim Tetwa.
If I could then remind you of evidence that you placed before this commission on your first day of hearing when looking at the overall organogram, dealing with both the police and dealing with the justice clusters. It was your evidence that the clusters of police, justice, intelligence, finance, governance, parliament, and the presidency cannot do without each other. They all form very important gears in this big machinery, and if any one of those are absent, the whole justice system will be compromised. And that's the evidence that you had given.
Chair, that's my evidence, and it's imperative.
So what would be the benefit of anyone who would have a beneficial right over the National Prosecuting Justice Cluster, or rather, apologies, over the Justice Cluster, or even over the Police Cluster?
I would like you to rephrase that question, please.
That's a good idea.
1 second. Just ask them to lower the aircon again. Yeah. Okay. Just rephrase the question so the witness will understand this.
No problem, Chair. You've highlighted beneficiaries relevant to each particular investigation. Do you have any comment as to exactly what the benefit would be to anyone who who's in a position, in decision-making positions within these clusters?
Chair, if I understand the question, it's axiomatic that if you are in charge of a cluster, you wield some sort of power. And that power ought to be used with discretion and within the confines of the Constitution and within the confines of the law. Unfortunately, my evidence, I would allege, indicates that a number of people in these key positions, where they either placed there to benefit certain individuals, politicians and businessmen. I don't believe for one moment that the prosecutors involved that I've discussed here, Chair, I don't believe that for one moment, that they acted without fear or favor. In my view, they acted wrongfully. I've opened criminal cases against some of them. They've not acted in the spirit of the Constitution. They've not acted according to their own policy guidelines or their own code of conduct. Chair, in my view, some of them are disgrace to the National Prosecuting Authority. With regards to law enforcement, Chair, burning in Tlamecha, Chair, is the biggest disaster that's ever hit law enforcement in this country. He has eviscerated a vital institution to fight corruption in our country, Chair. Chair, we see all over the country there's service delivery protests. I've always maintained there is money around, but unfortunately there are corrupt elements in our society that enrich themselves at the expense of the poor. And then you have a person that's supposed to be exposing the corruption, but then he becomes part of a group of people that cover up the corruption. And the same applies to the prosecutors that I've mentioned, Chair.
Thank you. And then the last part of your affidavit deals specifically with the role of intelligence services and the Sunday Times. That can be found on page 66, starting from paragraph 225. General Booysen, do you have any comments in relation to the role of the intelligence services in the Sunday Times?
Chair, I've mentioned before that the SARS so-called rogue unit, the Cater Manor so-called death squad, and the so-called rendition investigation are all inextricably linked. In all of those instances, the intelligence services would leak information to journalists, the same to journalists time and time again. Stefan Hofstadter, Mzilikazi wa Afrika. Exposés would follow. Once the exposés are published, within a week or two, the Johan van Lochenbergs, the Anwar Dramats, the Johan Booysens, the Shadrach Sabias, and so I can carry on, are suspended. Investigations that they are busy with become dormant. It's no coincidence, Chair, and that's been the modus operandi. Leaking of information, and Chair, I think it's important that I mention that the current editor of the Sunday Times, Mr. Sikoko, he at least had the courage of his conviction to approach me and extend a hand to me to apologize. The editor of the time, Mr. Ray Hartley, he's missing in action. So I don't want to paint the current editor under or blame him for the ills of what happened previously. And Chair, that's one example how the media could be abused to further nefarious agendas by certain individuals. I have been approached by a professor from one of the universities who's busy writing a book on how the media could be exploited or used to further nefarious goals.
Do you confirm, General Booysen, that in October 2018, the editor of the Sunday Times, Mr. Bongani Sikoko, apologized for getting the Cato Manor publication wrong, and that there was in fact an apology that was published, which appears as an attachment to your affidavit at page 510.
Chair, that's indeed so, and Mr. Sikoko also gave me an opportunity to write a full page, unedited, in the Sunday Times, which I did. He went as far as to say that he would write editorial comment, which he would allow me to edit, and that says a lot about him. He had shown me his editorial comment, and I didn't change a thing, and my article went in unpublished.
Uncorrect, unamended.
Unamended,
Yeah.
Chair, I would also just like to point your direction to the affidavit of Colonel Padayachi, which at page 475 and paragraph 11 also deals with the involvement of the media, and in particular, Mr. Wa Africa. And then I've just realized, General Booysen, that I forgot to ask you to confirm one of your affidavits which is attached to your papers, and that is in fact the affidavit that you had prepared, which was unsigned, and that you intended to hand, or rather that you handed to Major General Matakata. Can I ask you to just quickly page to 348 of file ZB and confirm that that is in fact the affidavit that you had handed in, which dealt with your visit to the Gupta residence.
Which page?
It's page 348.
Major General Booysen, are you looking at the correct leave out file?
Yes, I found it, Chair. I confirm this is the statement, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you so much. And then,
That is the affidavit that you handed to the acting head of the Hawks after General Tlamenza had left.
That's right, General Matakata.
Yes, okay, thank you.
the last annexure that I would like to direct your attention to is Annexure 29, which is of the same bundle, Exhibit ZB.
Did you say 329?
It's Exhibit 29, which is at page 5, starts at 513.
Exhibit 29.
Yes, Chair. Oh, apologies. Exhibit ZB,
Yeah,
page 513.
okay.
Do you recognize this article, General Booysen?
I do, Chair.
Were you involved in the production of this article?
I was, Chair.
And do you have any comments in relation to this particular article?
Chair, I referred to the compilation of this document when I was invited to the Nelson Mandela Foundation. And that's where this document originated from. It's a combination of universities that did research on, and they titled the document Betrayal of the Promise, How South Africa is Being Stolen. It inter alia narrates some of the issues that I dealt with in my investigation, and they accurately reflect what my submissions were to the researchers in this document.
Okay.
And just for the record, Chair, this particular excerpt only includes page 3, 19, 50, 51, and 52 of that particular report. And then finally, General Booysen, do you have any closing remarks?
Chair, I'm not going to talk from my statement.
Yes.
The first thing, Chair, I would like to say I really appreciate this opportunity after 6 and 7 years of attack after attack after attack of people that's supposed to be protecting me. Chair, I'm grateful for this opportunity. And I'm also grateful for the 2 advocates that dealt with me, Advocate September and Advocate Pretorius, and also the investigators, Mr. Groenewald, for the understanding in the way they dealt with this matter. Chair, I'm going to conclude. I don't want to make a long speech. But as long as the people that I've mentioned in my statement, they can change the head of the Hawks, they can change the head of the NPA, they can change the state president. But as long as these people remain their chair, and I will be proven right if they so happen to stay there. It happened with Mr. Nkasana. Mr. Nkasana, I did not know him personally. I managed to meet him at a much later stage. Mr. Nkasana felt the brunt of a cabal within the NPA. I felt the brunt of a cabal when I was member of the Hawks. Unless they get rid of the rotten apples within the NPA and the police and the Hawks, Chair, we are doomed. Thank you, Chair.
Yes. Well, maybe, Major General Booysen, I must once again thank you for coming forward to help this commission to give evidence and help this commission understand some of the things that have happened or were happening in the law enforcement sector, and some of the things that some of the people in that sector have gone through. I'm hoping that more and more people within the sector who have knowledge of things that have been happening will come forward and share with the Commission and the nation exactly what has been happening. Because, as I said before lunch, if we don't have a proper law enforcement agencies, then we don't have a country. So it's vitally critical that if there are things that have not been going well, that have not been done properly in the law enforcement sector, we should know, so that this commission can make recommendations as to what should really be done to make sure that the country has proper law enforcement agencies that do their job in accordance with the Constitution and the law. So thank you very much for coming forward to share what you know. Obviously, this is not the last day you give evidence, because it's likely that you may be asked to come back, and I've no doubt you have no problem with that. So we will still see you, I believe, but thank you very much. And others who have similar information should come forward and share what they know with the Commission and with the nation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Nothing further, Chair.
You have nothing further. So for now, you are excused, Major General Booysen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We are at the end of today's proceedings. adjourn and on Monday start at 10 o'clock. Is that in order?
That's in order, Chair.
Is that in order?
We will be dealing with the Transnet tranche of evidence.
We will start with Transnet.
Yes, Chair.
And then sometime later we will have more witnesses on law enforcement agencies.
Yes, Chair. We are by no means complete with the law enforcement agency
Yes.
tranche of evidence, but that will resume after certain SOEs have been dealt with.
Yeah. Okay, no, thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
We'll adjourn then for today, and we'll resume on Monday at 10 o'clock. We adjourn.
All rise.